same sky. No more exploitation of the planet and people by the wealthy who think of themselves as kings. In a vast universe, we are just a moment in time. Across the world, brothers and sisters stand together. We can knock down the walls, cross the oceans, climb the mountains high. Capital divides us, but we stand together. Red, green and black flags waving high. Symbols of the revolution. We all live under the same sky. Red, black and green. We welcome our symbols of the revolution. We live under the same sky. Red, black and green. We welcome our symbols of the revolution. We live under the same sky. We all live under the same sky. We all live under the same sky.
We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world there is room for everyone. The good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed.
We all live under the same sky. Red, black and green. We welcome our symbols of the revolution. We all live under the same sky. Red, black and green. We welcome our symbols of the revolution.
Welcome. Wrong microphone. Welcome everybody. We are going to go to something a little bit special now. You will have to forgive me to get this running. This is some work by a local animator, and I think this is rather fun. Just a moment. Welcome to Cosmic Frequencies 2026 here in Hexham, the gateway town to the UNESCO-recognised National Park of the Dark Skies. That's why we own this idea and why we should be doing it in Hexham for years to come. Thank you very much indeed for trusting us and coming to the show. That was a fantastic animation there by local animation artist Lisa Brewis. Is Lisa here somewhere? Lisa, hello! Thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you very much. Okay, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers for you tonight. And I think without further ado, I would like to get into one of them to speak, and that's going to be Dan Pye, who opened the show last week. But before I do that, I'd just like to point out that tomorrow, as part of an extended Cosmic Frequencies, we've done a bigger event this year, and we hope to expand it further in years to come. We have a film festival. 2 exclusives are going to be shown tomorrow. One starting at 11. We have Rendezvous with the Future, which is a BBC landmark produced documentary. It was actually produced for China Central Television, but it is English language, and it was produced by Steve Crabtree, my former BBC colleague. It is a beautiful piece of film narrative. I would offer that this is probably one of the very few chances for you to see this, and it's going to be shown at 11 tomorrow. So that's my bit of plugging for that. And at 12:30, we have the UFOs of Soesterberg, which is a Dutch-made film. It is subtitled and made by Bram Rosa, who is also with us here this evening. He gave a talk earlier, and we'll be doing a Q&A as well. So please think about tomorrow if you have some time, because those are 2 exclusives. You're not going to get to see those, certainly not the BBC one, I would have thought, at any time in this country. Bram might show the UFOs of Soesterberg at some point in the future, but I think get a chance to get to see it tomorrow if you can. Okay, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers for you this evening. Dan Pye opened our show last year with an absolutely fantastic explanation of the enormity of the universe and our infinitesimally small place within it. As we are on the discovery of understanding whether we are alone in the universe or not, Dan has come up with a fantastic presentation. So Dan, if you'd like to take this down, Dan is going to talk about the wonder of exoplanets. So if you give me a moment, we're going to make sure that we can get this up and running. Right. Okay. Now I need to press this. Minor technical gremlins. And
I'd rather watch more of Lisa's.
yeah, I thought that was excellent. At least more, please.
Yeah.
More, please. Okay. All right, Dan.
There we go. All right, lovely. Hello, everybody. My name is Dan Pye, and I'm the director at Kielder Observatory. And I thought I'd start tonight by just telling you a little bit about Kielder Observatory and what we are. And that'll take probably the first hour. And then, no, I'm joking. That'll take a couple of seconds, and then we'll get into tonight's topic, which is looking for planets that exist way beyond our solar system, these so-called exoplanets, and how we go about looking for those. I will first start with a caveat, though, this is the name of my talk, so I was told the science of exoplanets. I'm not very comfortable with that because I'm not really a scientist. I'm not qualified to be a scientist. I'm somebody who fell into astronomy and ended up in the position that I'm in just by blagging it, I think. So I've retitled it. It's not that. It's called Is There Anything In There? So that's the name of this talk from here on in. Anyway, Kielder Observatory is a wonderful venue. We are sat in Kielder, which on the top of this beautiful hill. If you haven't seen this before, there were this lovely wooden building designed back in 2008 and built in 2008, and we were designed to do just a couple of events per month as a science outreach facility. That's the reason the Kielder Observatory exists. We don't exist because we're doing any meaningful research. We're just here to tell people about the night sky. And since then, we've grown a little bit. We no longer do a couple of events per month. We now do about 600 a year on site at Kielder Observatory, and then we also have our other site as well, which is the Twice Brood Observatory, which is on Hadrian's Wall, both within what is one of the largest expanses of dark skies in Europe. In fact, the largest protected. And dark skies is really why we're there, where we're trying to escape all of this light pollution, if possible. And I'm sure you know, if you live in a town or city, when you look at the night sky, you can't see the stars. You can't see the expanse of stars, the expanse of the universe that you would see if you were elsewhere. Places like London produce so much light that it scatters through the atmosphere and prevents us from being able to see that. If we had no atmosphere, we'd be able to see the universe all the time. We'd be dead. Because we wouldn't be able to breathe. But we'd be able to see the universe nevertheless. But because of light pollution mixing with that atmosphere, we can't. And the difference that it makes is like this. Look, this is an image that was taken inside of the city centre of Newcastle a few years ago. And it's a lovely image. You can see lots of stars here. Some of the more keen-eyed of you might notice a collection of stars that makes a popular constellation. Anybody spotted, just out of interest? Orion, yeah, absolutely. You can just about see Orion there, but it's really hard to see. So what would happen if we did what we did this night, which is jumped in the car, took the same photo, same patch of sky, same settings, everything exactly the same, but we were away from all of that light pollution. Instead, you get something that looks a bit more like this. Totally different. So you see a lot more stars. You can see the sky looks more black there now as well, which is good, and we can see different colours. And all of that is possible just a couple of miles up the road, because we have the largest expanse of protected dark skies in Europe on our doorstep, the International Dark Sky Park of Northumberland. 1,500 square kilometres of protected dark skies to explore. Kielder Observatory is on the top side of that, top left side, and Twice Brood Observatory down on the bottom left-hand side. But there's still loads of other places that you could go and enjoy the night sky across the rest of Northumberland. And in fact, actually, if you go up towards the top right there near the Cheviot Hills, you'll also encounter the UK's largest population of feral goat as well. To watch the night sky with. Anyway, what we're here to talk about is looking for planets elsewhere beyond Earth. But I want to just start a little bit closer to home first off. We've been looking at the night sky for a very long time, millennia in fact, trying to figure out this, I guess, ultimate question: what lies beyond the night sky? Is it that there's another plane of existence, which the culture who lived in this desert thought that was the case? This is the Atacama Desert in Chile. It was taken about 2,500 metres above sea level. And I love this image for two reasons. There's some wonderful rocks in the foreground that you might see, which have these lovely etchings on, which we'll come to in a second. But there's also a little white turret just in the top right-hand side on the hill there. And that there is called La Silla. It's a telescope which was built quite some time ago, one of the first in this desert. And it's looking for the existence of exoplanets. And we'll come back to that one later as well. But first off, these rocks in the foreground, the pictures on them represent various different objects in the night sky, or various different shapes in the night sky. We're familiar with making dot to dots of all of the different bright stars. That's our constellations that we're probably more familiar with today. But the constellations of this particular civilization were slightly different. It wasn't the bright patches in the night sky, it was the dark patches in the night sky, places where they couldn't see stars or light. And they thought they were gateways to the next plane of existence. And I just think that's a really interesting, nice way of looking at the night sky, very different to how we view it today. Because we're looking, whenever we look at the night sky, at light. Light is the thing that tells us most of the stuff that we know, all of the stuff that we know, in fact, of the universe. And it was only really with the invention of the telescope that we were starting to understand that in more detail. This chap here, this is Galileo Galilei, and in the middle, that's a telescope. And Galileo didn't invent the telescope. He wasn't the inventor of it at all. It was a guy from the Netherlands who invented it, or so we think, a guy called Hans Lippershey. And I love the story actually about him inventing it. There was a story which is that he dropped something on the floor one day, and you can imagine him fumbling around and then just getting back up. And as he was getting back up, he looked across his table and he realised that he could see some lenses made the church in the distance look closer. And he thought, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to call it a make closer machine, which I think is a better name, which we should have stuck with. But anyway, it got changed to telescope. Galileo here was really good at using them on the night sky, so it wasn't originally introduced for usage in that way, but he knew, or he suspected, that all of the stuff that's really far away he could make closer with this machine. So he looked at the brightest object in the night sky first, and one of those was Jupiter, which, after closer examination, revealed that it was a little bit fatter than other objects he pointed his telescope towards, but it also had these companion stars, little stars that he couldn't see without his telescope, which appeared to move position as the night went on, suggesting that they potentially went round this object. And that's quite interesting, because at that time, the general principle was that everything went around the Earth. Nothing could go around anything else. Yet here's Galileo looking at something going around something else. Something wasn't quite as what it seemed. Then he turned his attention to the sun, which is something you shouldn't point your telescope at, by the way, unless you've got a filter for it. So there's an eclipse this week. If you go and point your telescope at the sun, please make sure you've got a filter on it, because you'll go blind. And Galileo knew that, luckily. So instead, he pointed his telescope towards it in the morning and the night, and he projected the disc of light on the wall behind him. And you could see on that disc of light behind him that there were some imperfections, some dark markings. And he thought, well, that's interesting. This thing must be a physical thing. And so he kept looking at it day after day, and sure enough, after a few days, he realised that this object appeared to be moving, spinning around on its axis, a physical boundary as well, physical featured boundary. Now that's incredible. So he got really excited and wrote about this in his book and other things. Then he got arrested, of course, and put under house arrest for the rest of his life, did Galileo. But he'd already started a whole revolution of astronomy. This was the defining point in astronomy, whereby we started to talk astronomy as more of a physical discovery of the night sky and what lays beyond, using telescopes. So he's somewhat of a pioneer in that sense. And I should mention, he was pardoned in 1992 after being dead a bit, but anyway. There was another chap who didn't get away quite as easily, and it is very topical to mention him because it leads on to what we're going to talk about next, which is this chap here. His name was Giordano Bruno. And Giordano was an incredible thinker, and he had a dream one night, and his dream was that all of the stars in the night sky were suns with planets orbiting around them. Of course, I'm paraphrasing here, but there's a lot more detail in that. But Giordano thought, what an incredible thought, what an incredible idea. I'm going to go and tell everybody around the world about this idea. Maybe it was a signal from God. And so he travelled around Europe to try and convince people to get on board with his idea. All the stars are suns with planets going around them. And he came to the UK. And he went to some lovely dinners in London, some high society dinners, mixing with all sorts of people. And one of those dinners, it said that potentially somebody either at that dinner or this person was physically there had spoken to Shakespeare. And Shakespeare started writing otherworldly thoughts in some of his plays as a result of this. Maybe he had an interaction with Giordano Bruno at this time, nobody knows. But anyway, Giordano was quickly ushered away from wherever he went. People hated this idea, and eventually he was coaxed back to Rome, where he was arrested and put in prison for quite some time. Every now and again they'd drag him out and say, "Look, Giordano, are you sure about this?" And he said, yeah, I'm convinced this is what's happening. He was teaching other prisoners about this theory as well. Anyway, a while later in the year 1600, he was pulled out into Campo de Fiore and butt naked, tied upside down to a stake. His tongue was stapled to the stake, and they set fire to him, just as a result of this theory, that all the stars are suns with planets going around them. Anyway, he was right, wasn't he? It just took a bit of time to understand it, what he was talking about back then. This was before Galileo had even built his telescope for the first time and started looking at the night sky in greater detail. This was a really dangerous time to do astronomy and to come out with these controversial thoughts. But there was Giordano Bruno, a pioneer of his time anyway. And so you can go see his statue there in Campo de Fiore in Italy if you fancy it as well. But the big problem that all of these astronomers had in history, and we still have today, is that the universe is really big. And this is what we talked about last year for those of us who were here last year. The universe is really big. This is the physical distance between the Earth and the Moon, if we were to shrink them down and put them on the screen right now. And the Moon is only 250,000 miles away from us, whereas the Sun is 93 million miles away from us. And the Sun is, it's a good job it's 93 million miles away from us, because it's really big and dangerous and awful. It's a little under 1 million miles in diameter, so you could fit the Earth across it 109 times. Inside it, closer to 1.3 million times. And it's hot, 5,500 degrees on its surface, a million degrees or so, a few million degrees in fact, as you start to get deeper inside. But what's it doing? Why is it different to a planet? Well, first off, we could say it's producing lots of energy. It's doing this thing that we call fusion, and we're not going to dig too much into that because we haven't got time, but it's doing fusion inside, which is producing energy, and that enables us to see it, feel it, experience it from the distance that we are. It's a big hot object, and it certainly is responsible for, or at least involved in, what happened here on Earth, which is the emergence of life, and life depends quite heavily on our sun. Delicate things like our lovely butterfly here, look, lovely butterfly, and then also this thing here. People always say, oh, the dinosaurs are extinct, and yes, they majoritively are, but there is still some kind of ancestor of dinosaurs, which is birds. Birds have changed significantly to what they had a very long time ago. Life on this planet, it changes as time goes on. It evolves, it adapts to its conditions. And it certainly is very evident when you look at creatures such as the domesticated chicken, which is a fantastic creature. And the reason why, or one of the main reasons why it's such a great creature to use as a crop for human consumption, whether you agree with it or not, is that it is very adaptable to its conditions. Wherever you take a chicken, it'll learn to live with that environment, whether it be too hot, whether it be too cold, whether it be confined. Wherever it goes, it can adapt to its conditions very, very rapidly, very, very quickly. These creatures are incredible. And if you have chickens, you will know this at all. If you have chickens and they hear the seed, their backs go up and they're like a velociraptor coming towards you. They're incredible. They are definitely dinosaurs. But they're not the most incredible creature on our planet. In fact, many of the most incredible creatures on our planet we probably don't even see. They're in the depths of the oceans. Very difficult environments to live in. Very high pressure conditions. Free from any light source. Our sun doesn't penetrate the depths of our oceans. They're feeding from other energy sources. Incredible creatures down in the depths of the oceans. But the most spectacular, and I know at least one person in this audience agrees with me on this, most spectacular living life form on this planet is the tardigrade. It's an incredible object or creature. Look at it, it's handsome. And these things, they live in abundance on wood. Mossy wood, if you see mossy wood, sometimes you can do an experiment at home if you fancy it. Go find some mossy wood, get the moss, and get a really good microscope, and you can see them swimming around. They're incredible, and you can do anything to them. You can squash them, take all their air away, fire loads of radiation at them, blow them up, anything. And these things just either have a nap or just get on with it. They're incredibly resilient things, are these things. There may even be some still living on the outside of the space station, we don't really know. And they also, as we get through into October, make a fantastic costume as well. So if anybody fancies making me one of these, I really want one. So where would we look for life beyond our planet? Now we've learned a little bit about the fact that life is much more resilient. So I think it's really difficult to think about all the different types of life, thinking about just ourselves and the things that we interact with. But there's trillions of species that have lived on this planet in so many different environments. Where would we start to look next? Well, the obvious answer is other planets. The ones that we can see. And places like Mars seems to be a reasonable place to go to. And many years ago, it was thought that Mars was inhabited. When telescopes started to get bigger, people thought, oh, we can see some activity on Mars. There's definitely life on Mars. Thing is, Mars does look active if you look at it through a telescope without very good resolution, because it experiences dust storms. So those clouds appear and the surface starts to change. It could almost look a little bit like fauna growing and then decaying. It's also got polar ice caps which shrink and increase in size. It's a wonderful planet, but it definitely doesn't look like, from the surface, that there's anything immediately obvious that there's life on Mars. When we got there in the 70s, big dry desert, not an interesting place for life. But there is still that open question, and I'm always very open to this, is that maybe there is something still living underneath the surface of Mars. Because as we've learned about from Earth, there's many different conditions that life can adapt itself to. Is there something which has moved deeper into Mars and is still there, living in some really interesting conditions, which are safer than being on the surface, where the atmosphere has been stripped away? Or is it that somewhere like the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn are the places that will find life. Places like that have incredible conditions deep within them, warm oceans, places very similar to how the Earth may have been when life started to emerge here on Earth, where minerals are mixing with water and becoming life. That's probably where I think my money would be. And I think we're really, really close to finding it as well. There's some incredible missions on the way to Jupiter now to have a look at these icy moons to find out whether or not there is life on those moons. I think we're really, really close. But then moving a little bit further away, are we just one solar system and the only solar system in the universe? Was Giordano Bruno right? Absolutely. I said that just before there. Whether this exists or not, we don't know. But what we do know is that there is planets that do orbit around two stars, multiple stars, in fact. Multiple star systems are quite common, whether it be two binary stars like this, or whether it be 3 stars, 4 stars, going around each other in various different configurations. How would we find them? One way that we could find them is by directly imaging them. If we've got something which is incredibly high resolution, a high resolution image of a star, we can obscure the brightness of the star, and then that starts to reveal slightly fainter objects that surround it. And in this case, what this image shows here is on the left-hand side there is a very, very bright planet, and then on the other side is a slightly dimmer planet. And that one on the left is about 10 times the size of Jupiter, 10 times the mass of Jupiter, sorry. And the one on the right there is only a couple of times the mass of Jupiter, but still very, very big planets. And big planets are the ones that are going to be immediately obvious by using this technique. But it only works up to a certain distance right now as well, because here on Earth, with our big telescopes, they're looking through atmosphere, resolution is limited right now. So how else would we find planets other than just physically seeing them? Well, there's a method that I want to just quickly go through, which is called transit method, which involves looking at the light that you get from a star and then watching it for a period of time until you see a little fluctuation in that brightness. And that fluctuation in the brightness means that perhaps a planet is going around that star and has come between you, your apparatus, and that star. And you can watch for these characteristic signals time and time again. You wouldn't just see it once and go, oh yeah, there's a planet. You might do it time and time again, look at some data for a longer period of time. But there's also another artifact that you get from this as well, which isn't just that one dimming. There's also another dimming as well, and a slight increase in brightness that happens when you watch a star. So when the planet comes between your apparatus and the star, yes, it will dim, but then as it goes around the other side, well, it starts to shine a little bit of light back towards the apparatus. There might be a little increase in brightness, and then suddenly that brightness dissipates again or disappears again, and you get another little dip in brightness. So you don't just get that dip in brightness when it comes between you and it, but also around the other side as well. And the data that you get from this, and you can't really see it very well on the screen actually, is there's loads of little dots, and the trend, or the average if you like, is those bigger dots in the middle, which dip and then increase, and then you get a big dip and then increase and then increase. Again, that's the kind of data that you get from this. And it can tell us a lot. It can tell us, well, it can tell us the distance that this object is from the star. It might even reveal a little bit about its size, perhaps, as well. How much of the star does it dim? If we know how big the star is, we could then have a look at how big the planet is as well. But only about 1% of stars are orientated this way. So for the next method, we need to go a little bit deeper. This is the constellation of Orion again that we saw at the beginning there, in a bit more detail. And up towards the top left there, we've got a star called Betelgeuse, or Betelgeuse, or however you want to pronounce it. Nobody knows, right? The original name for this star, we don't know how to pronounce. But what we do know is that it means armpit. So can we all just agree? It's called armpit from now on. And then on the other side, we've got Bellatrix, lovely big blue star. So we've got an orange star and a blue star. What's the difference that I can tell between these two stars straight away other than the colour? Well, it's the temperature. straight away I can say that one of those stars is hotter than the other. Which one? The blue one, which feels unusual to many people. Why is the blue star hotter than the red star? That's not the case on my taps at home, unless it was messed up. But it's certainly the case with stars, and it certainly is the case with flames. And you'll know this if you are, like myself, at school, one of those people who, if you have a Bunsen burner on, you got a lovely yellow flame and you're running your hand through it like this, and then you turn the oxygen in, and then layers of skin come off, and it's all messy anyway. Don't do that. This is why. Light's travelling as waves. And down at this left-hand side, we've got very long wavelengths of light, radio waves. That's what's making my microphone work right now, connected to wherever it's connected to. And then next to that, we've got microwaves, which is how satellites communicate. Very safe, radio waves, microwaves. Not if you stick your head in a microwave oven, that's not what I'm suggesting here, but they are very safe, don't worry about them too much. And then we've got infrared. Now infrared we are a little bit sensitive to because we can feel it and we also produce it as well. If I switch off all the lights in this room, I'd still see you because you'd be producing infrared light. And then in the middle, we've got that little visible light spectrum which starts at red, goes through to violet. And then off the other end we've got ultraviolet. We don't want that. That's not very good for us, this ultraviolet. It helps our skin mutate and create complexities that can become dangerous to us. Then we've got X-rays, which are very useful, but there's a reason why the radiologist is stood behind a concrete wall. And it's because every day if they were getting an X-ray, that would make them feel very sick. Pilots get X-ray poisoning over long careers because of exposure to X-ray light from the sun. And then we've got gamma radiation, or gamma waves, right at the very top. If anybody's seen the TV series Chernobyl, you'll know that it melts skin. That stuff is not good. It's really, really awful stuff, is gamma radiation. So as you can see, we've moved from stuff that doesn't really hurt us down here to stuff that does melt skin at the other side. You could say, okay, we've introduced more energy there, perhaps. So as we transition from red through violet, our redder star is cooler, producing redder light, and then our hotter star is bluer, more energetic, producing bluer light. And the reason why I'm telling you this, because light is the only reason why we understand a great deal about our universe. And the way that we understand it is by doing something very similar to what we've got on the screen right here now, which is shining light through a prism and producing a rainbow. But within that rainbow, there's a lot of information. This here was produced a few years ago, and I love it. You could almost imagine it like starting at the longest wavelength of visible light in the top left, and the shortest wavelength of visible light in the bottom right. All nice and neatly arranged, transitioning one colour to the next. And notice, there's missing information. Why is there missing information? Well, the kind of image in the bottom right, I guess, gives it away. It's barcodes, in a way. We can scan these missing lines and reveal a lot about the chemistry of an object. That's how we understand the chemistry of objects. We can see these barcode lines hidden within light. But how does that translate to understanding whether or not there's a planet going around a star? Well, for that, we have to think about some other wavelengths of light that we know about and the way that light acts in the universe. And this is a really good example, I think. This is Doppler effect. So our ambulance over there, if it started its siren, it would be producing its siren nice and evenly. If the ambulance was sitting still, the wavelengths would be moving out evenly in all directions. But then, as the ambulance starts moving, the ambulance is going to be moving towards our, let's call her Sharon, over here. And then the sound is going to be moving towards Sharon, but the ambulance is going to be catching up with it and squashing, compressing those sound waves. Then as it moves away from Sharon, away it goes, but that sound is travelling back towards her and stretching. So when the sound waves are coming towards her, as the object's moving towards her, they're squashing. When they're moving away, they're getting stretched. Light does the same thing. This is the Celia look. I told you we'd come back to it. This is it a bit closer. And inside there is a telescope called HARPS. And HARPS is looking at this in light. And it's what we call redshift and blueshift. Now people often say to me, Dan, redshift and blueshift, does that mean it looks red and it looks blue? No, that's not what we're saying here. What we're saying is, those barcode lines that we looked at before, the chemical lines, they're always in the same place if the object is static. But if we see those chemical lines and they've shifted more towards the blue side, but then the light has been compressed, it's been squashed, so the object's moving towards us. And then if they've been redshifted, they've moved towards the red side. They've been stretched, it's moving away from us. Stars wobble. They don't just have the center of axes of rotation of being the center of gravity. Instead, if they've got planets going around them, the planet pulls a little bit on that star and the center of gravity starts to shift a little bit. So what that means is that as the planet's going around, we're seeing this redshift and blueshift changing slightly. And that can reveal a lot about the planet that's going around it, even the quantity of planets going around it as well. Maybe the mass of those planets as well. This is a really great method of being able to discover whether or not there's planets going around stars. It's called the radial velocity method. Now there's many other methods that we could have talked about tonight, but we would have been here literally all night, and I wouldn't have been talking about it because I know about those, and that's kind of it. There's loads of other methods. Here's some of them here, look. So as of today, there's 6,336 planets that we found around other stars. There's also 8,113 candidates, which has been identified by TESS, which is a satellite, the Transiting Exoplanet Survey satellite, which is looking for these things. But as you can see, there's also disk kinematics, pulsation for timing variations, astrometry. All these are the different methods of looking for planets and have been successful. And you'll notice some peaks there as well. That's where there's been a big data dump from a satellite called Kepler as well. So then how do we understand about the atmosphere? So just to finish on, now we have the telescope, the James Webb Space Telescope in space. It's able to glance through the atmosphere of planets as they transit. So as that planet moves in front of its star, a little bit of sunlight passes through that planet's atmosphere, and then we can do the spectroscopy that we looked at before. We can find out the chemical makeup of that atmosphere. And the kind of things that we're looking for are things like dimethyl sulfide, oxygen, ozone, methane, a mixture of all of these different things. But that only really tells us that those planets are a little bit like Earth. It doesn't really tell us whether or not those planets do have the potential to harbour any other type of life. Because remember, when we're looking for life, we're only looking for life that's like us. How do we know to look for life that isn't like us if we don't know it doesn't exist, if we don't know it exists? That's really hard. Looking for something that you don't know is possible makes it really difficult. And I think this is where our biggest stumbling block is. Anyway, I'm going to leave you with a number now, which is this. This is 100 sextillion, which a few years ago someone romanticized this number as being approximately 10 times the amount of grains of sand on our planet. So every little grain of sand on our planet, times it by 10, that's that number. That's the amount of visible stars that we can see from Earth using all of our instruments right now. Around every star, we think there's approximately 5 planets. So times it by 5, and you get lots. And that's my final thoughts. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Yeah, Q&A after the break, after the music, after the break. So to stimulate you to think about some questions you might like to ask, it's my job to ask the odd question. So we have only proved exoplanets in my lifetime. So the lifetime of everybody in this cinema. We obviously had predicted them, but now we've found them. Has that changed the ideology in astronomy? Has people just said, yeah, we knew we were going to find this? Or do you think actually there has been a very specific push towards an idea that actually we can go down a thread here, and very specifically within the realm of what we are interested in this festival, is that actually, you touched on it there, that the mass spectroscopy of the atmospheres of these planets, that we are looking at a very different shift in astronomy overall?
It's a hard question, I guess, because I guess the big question about this is what do we get from understanding whether or not they're there? And I never think that, and I never hear anybody in the astronomy community ask that question. It's usually other people.
We know that.
Because we know they're there, and by doing what we do to find these different places, we find other things on the way. So I think people's curiosity hasn't changed. I also just think that it also opens up the net of potential different types of astronomy to classical astronomy, of just understanding the big questions about the universe. Cosmology is a big subject. But I think now there's a real shift to astrochemistry, astrobiology, which was never a subject really many years ago. Those are now subjects. So I think it just makes the field bigger than it once used to be.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Can we put our hands together for Dan Pye? Fantastic presentation. Thank you very much indeed, Dan. I look forward to being with us next year. Okay.
On my birthday though, please.
Oh, right, okay. When is your birthday?
Today. Yeah.
Okay. Oh! We all just wish Dan Pye happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Dan. Happy birthday to you. And as a result of that, the Forum Cinema will now have to send a £25,000 check to the Forum Life Society for the use of Happy Birthday. I kid you not. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we have our next presenter, please. Steve Crabtree is a former colleague of mine at the BBC. I'm just going to move this over here. Forgive me, it's a bit less slick than it was last year. I'll do this. Now, Steve and I worked on a documentary series many years ago. I said last year he would do it, so his career took off. I went in a different direction. But Steve, Steve has been trawling the BBC archive to give us a narrative. Steve, would you like to tell us about it?
I'll introduce it with clip 1, and then I'll tell you a bit more about my presentation.
Is man unique? Is he alone in the universe? Is he the Lord of creation fashioned by God in his own image and likeness? Or is the universe populated by countless millions of creatures incredibly more intelligent than man? Tonight, in our search for an answer to these questions, we look beyond our planet Earth, beyond our immediate neighbour the Moon, beyond our entire solar system to the further points of our galaxy, and on beyond the billions of trillions of other stars that abound in the infinity of space. Since the dawn of history, man has looked up at the night sky and wondered if intelligent life might exist on other worlds besides his own. As astronomy developed, the concept of the existence of life on other worlds began to acquire some scientific basis. Many of the early Greek philosophers taught that our Earth was not the sole dwelling place of intelligent life. This is not a science fiction program, but one in which scientists speculate and state their case seriously.
Nature doesn't do things in ones and twos. She's not mean, there are millions of planets, millions of stars and millions of galaxies, and very likely up there, millions of other different kinds of intelligent creature.
So firstly, I know there was a lot of man and mankind in that, but it was there were different times, you know. So I used to work at the BBC. I've worked on two programs of which anyone who likes science programs may have heard of. I ran the Sky at Night for 5 years, which is the world's longest running science program, and I also ran a show called Horizon on BBC Two, which is the second longest science program running in the world. And so I know that archive unbelievably well. So I've dug out some stuff for you to show you how aliens and a little bit of UFOs for any UFO fans out there have been reported by the BBC since the 60s. There's a few other little goodies in there that I've dug out as well. But I thought I'd start with one for the UFO fans, with a super special cameo. If you watch, possibly some of the world's most famous abductees ever. It's from 1968.
What are flying saucers, unidentified flying objects, UFOs? Some people say they've seen them. Animal lover Joe Sanderton, ex-professional boxer, deputy sheriff Wisconsin. He showed me the pancake given him by the flying saucer men. These are the two Devon policemen who chased a flying saucer across Dartmoor at 90 miles an hour. Barney and Betty Hill, who eventually revealed under hypnosis the most extraordinary flying saucer story of them all. What about the explanations which have been offered in the press and elsewhere?
I give no credence to them.
And you, Roger?
Well, I think if somebody could give us some good logical explanation for what it was, then probably we might be able to accept it.
Things are sent from this world into outer space, and there should be a rational explanation of where they end up. Sometimes there is no rational explanation, and I've had ordinary people say to me, well, it's obvious, you know, that if we send stuff up there, that they can send stuff down to us. It's not beyond the realms of possibility, however, I don't think.
Just pause it there. So this next clip, Barney and Betty Hill, for the UFO fans out there, very famous abductees. If anyone was here last year, I think I played this clip. It's one of my absolute all-time favourites. It ties very nicely in with what Dan was saying as well. It's from 1969. I'm going to refer back to this clip once or twice throughout the talk, so do, I'd be interested to see what you think when we have the Q&A. So if you want to play that one, please, Phil.
Good evening. We've just had some amazing photographs sent back by the American probe to Mars, Mariner 6. You can see, sir, some of the dark areas, which may be vegetation. Well, the question is, of course, are these dark areas due to organic matter, vegetation if you like, or are they not? Now, what about this all-important question of life on Mars? Do you think that these dark areas are due to anything organic? What do you think about it?
Primitive life, there may be. I don't even think so. Intelligent life, certainly not.
So in other words, you rather think that Mars was a dead planet?
Absolutely dead as a dodo.
Well, I suppose one of these things we're going to find out fairly soon.
Okay, so 1969, so the same year I was born. Fun fact, I should have actually been born on the day we walked on the moon, and had that happened, I would have been called Buzz, and not Steve. But I was late, so there you go. That's 1969. The technology of the time, with a probe going to Mars, couldn't decipher whether there was vegetation on it or not. I find that absolutely extraordinary that that's, 57 years ago, and that's how good our tech was. And Patrick, all right, fair enough, the scientist says he doesn't think there's, he thinks it's dead, but they genuinely don't know whether there's vegetation on Mars. And I just think that is frankly extraordinary, and hopefully throughout this little presentation you'll see why. Alan Hynek, another one for the UFO fans here. I found a little clip from a Horizon from 1972. Alan was one of the most famous UFO, scientists who studied UFOs. I don't know tons about UFOs, but I do know it's quite famous, and I thought it might be fun for the UFO fans to see an interview with him that the BBC did. So, here's Alan.
Astronomer Alan Hynek doesn't agree with the scientists who've written off unidentified flying objects as a nonsense problem without a meaningful solution.
In each age, there are certain things that are, you might say, admitted onto the playing field of science, and that varies with each age. And there were times certainly when hypnotism wasn't admitted on the playing field of science, or circulation of the blood, or bacterial cause of disease. All these things were laughed at.
Hynek is a man of considerable scientific reputation. After all, he designed the American satellite tracking system. But even he wasn't immune from the ridicule shown to anyone interested in the unexplained.
A colleague will say, well, what are you making this nonsense for? I say, well, how do you dare talk about these things if you haven't read the data, if you are not acquainted with the data? This is not scientific. I think myself that UFOs represent new empirical observations. And I simply cannot hold, after these 20 years experience, that all UFO reports can be explained as misperception, misidentifications, or hallucination.
The next clip is not from a Horizon or a Sky at Night, but I found it hidden in the archives. Anyone old enough here to remember James Burke? He was a very famous presenter back in the 60s and 70s, did Tomorrow's World. I did work on one show with him about 5 or 6 years ago, and he was just exactly as you would imagine he was back in the 60s. Anyway, this is a real lost gem, I think. So it's quite a longish clip, but I think it's worth watching it. Thank you.
Whatever they do see when the cameras first look out across the plains of Mars, the presence of anything living may have to do with other reasons than the availability of liquid water. One, because significant amounts of liquid water are highly unlikely, not to say virtually out of the question. Two, whatever has survived will have to cope with extremely rigorous conditions. High levels of lethal ultraviolet radiation from the sun and a temperature range from 80 degrees Fahrenheit at midsummer noon down to as low as minus 200 in the middle of the winter night. So if life has survived on Mars, it's either because it's dormant or because it's evolved to suit the environment, which is why the Viking cameras might just catch a glimpse of something like this, looking rather like a bit of polished stone, in fact the top end of a plant that could live on Mars. This section here, a translucent dome made by the plant out of the silicon elements in this soil, would act as a filter to protect it against the ultraviolet radiation, while at the same time letting through the visible sunlight necessary for the photosynthesis process. And that process would work in this area here, aided by these silicon light receptors. As for the water, well, if the theories about Mars are right, the water lies locked, frozen in permafrost layers below the surface, trapped by the plant roots, carrying nodules like these, using some kind of heat mechanism, perhaps a warm fluid circulating within the plant, to melt the permafrost. As far as we know, the entire surface of Mars could be littered with plants like this.
Well, it's not. You know, I think the props department had an absolute whale of a time on that one. Now, we can't do I can't do a presentation without Arthur C. Clarke, a presentation about aliens without Arthur C. Clarke in it. I found this interview with him from I think it's from the 70s. I'll just tell you one bit of trivia. There's a very, very famous clip of Arthur C. Clarke from a Horizon show talking about predicting the mobile phone. It was, when I ran Horizon, it was requested almost on a monthly basis. It's such a famous clip of this great genius, which you also, I'm a fan, predicting how much how the mobile phone is going to change our lives. Or, as he called it, a device that you would have in your pocket and be able to do business from anywhere in the world from the palm of your hand. And that's where everybody cuts, and that's the clip that they use on countless documentaries around the world. What they never show you is what he says after that. And if you keep the tape playing, he also predicts that we would have domesticated monkeys and they'd be cleaning our houses for us and doing the washing up. So, you know, he didn't get it right all the time. Anyway, here's Arthur talking about what he thinks aliens could be like.
Yes, Mars has been a bit of a disappointment, but I don't think we should write off Mars even now, because if there's never been any life on Mars, that's a very surprising fact, because it looks as though Mars may have been quite benign a few million years ago, or a few billion years ago.
But I wonder whether life had time to evolve there before conditions became impossible.
It begins to look as though life can evolve very rapidly if conditions are at all favourable. When you consider the incredible variety of life on this Earth, it's obviously impossible to speculate usefully about life on any other planet. I mean, who could have imagined the giraffe, the giant squid, the whale, or indeed, if you take a dispassionate viewpoint, us? Since on this one planet, in a relatively uniform environment, nature has done such fantastic things, and on planets that are very much hotter, or very much colder, or have different chemical constituents, then life could take almost any imaginable form.
Perfectly true. And I just wonder, you know, whether some of these more bizarre life forms that must exist here and there would be recognizable to us. What do you think?
It's quite possible that they might be totally unrecognizable. Of course, some of them might even be what we would call spiritual. It might be patterns of energy, or even patterns of light, not necessarily physical bodies at all. I know this is going really far from speculation. I suspect that most really advanced intelligences, though, will be electronic, mechanical, in other words, the successors of our computers. In fact, I think what we're doing now is to build our own successors.
That's pretty good, I reckon, you know. So we're moving into the 1980s now, and I think there's a degree of skepticism about aliens and UFOs creeping into the culture, or into the archives anyway. So I found quite a lot of stuff from the 80s where that's slightly been ridiculed. This is very typical, very typical of the sort of thing I do now.
If there are creatures from another world, where would they come to first?
To Rochdale, that's where. In the last few years, a large number of sincere, genuine people have reported seeing strange, cylinder-like objects in the sky. And many increasingly believe that aliens from outer space have selected Rochdale for their first contact with the planet Earth and the human race.
Mike Sachs is a local tailor and claims to have seen something not quite right on the moors.
What did I say up here? I saw something that I can't equate with anything that is flying on the Earth at this present time. It looked like what in common terminology is called a UFO, an unidentified flying object. The sound was a whirring, whining howl like a... That was the sound it made. After the event, then we thought, what if it hadn't have stopped descending? We'd have been mush underneath it, quite honestly.
You've drawn a picture of what it looked like, haven't you? Can I just have a look at it so we can...
With pleasure.
Get an indication. So that's the object there, is it?
That is the object.
Yeah. Are you a particularly gullible person, or, you know, or were you cynical about this kind of thing before you saw it?
Let's put it this way. Any man who's not open-minded is a fool.
Okay, so moving into the 90s now, and the science and technology, or certainly the technology was getting kind of better and better and better. I didn't know Dan was going to do exoplanets, but this is perfect, because this is the guy who found the first exoplanet ever, who was captured in a horizon. Again, I've just got a little clip for you, but you can see how excited they all were to have actually proved it for the first time.
51 Peg was certainly strange. At first it was just another star on the list, but a few months into the search, the Swiss team noticed that there was something different about it. When Didier Queloz set his computer software to work on the data, the analysis suggested 51 Peg was changing speed.
In fact, the first reaction that you have at that time is oh, something is wrong with the experiment. And you observe it again the day after and the day after, and then it was more and more awful because it was moving every day. And you say, all right, there is really a big problem with the experiment.
Every visit to the observatory gave them more data, and eventually a pattern emerged. When they looked at the graph as a whole, it showed a wobble.
After months of observations, they had all the proof they needed. And in October 1995, announced their discovery. The team had found the first planet outside of our solar system orbiting a sun-like star.
So it's really interesting because obviously we kind of all think that's where we should be looking for aliens, is on these exoplanets, but they're so far away. So obviously the technology then was landing things on Mars around the sort of that time, and I found a clip, it's a Sky9 clip, where they're back on Mars looking for life again.
In 2006, I caught up with one such mission. What made us rethink our ideas about life on Mars?
There now appears to be water everywhere. Okay, not liquid water as we know, but certainly ice. It might be possible that below the surface, actually if there's a local heat source, for example, that water might exist as a liquid. So, that's one of the most important prerequisites. So that's one factor. The other are the so-called extremophiles. We find in the most extreme of environments, in extremely acidic, extremely alkaline conditions, in high radiation environments, we're realizing that life is much, much tougher than we'd ever realized. So perhaps Mars is not such an aggressive environment for life to have developed.
And if it developed, what happened to it?
Now, clearly, because of the ultraviolet, also the cosmic radiation, the surface is sterile. But is it not possible that life, if it existed in a simple form, might have evolved a mechanism to survive the changing environment and gone below the surface? In fact, the models show that you don't have to go very far below the surface to be shielded from the UV and the cosmic rays. In fact, and this is one of the reasons why ExoMars aims to drill down below the surface for the first time.
So the next clip I'm going to show you, if I remind you of the Patrick Moore 1969 clip where Mariner is looking at Mars and sending pictures back, and they're speculating on whether there's going to be vegetation on it or not. This was one of my horizons that I commissioned. So I know this film really well. It might take a little bit of unpacking, but I always think, should I tell you what it's about first, and then watch it, or watch it and then tell you what it's about? Because it's quite an involved story. Many people in this auditorium will know it. But I'll play the clip and then I'll tell you what they're doing. But just bear in mind what Patrick was talking about. Less than, I think this was 47 years later, something like that. Anyway, less than 50 years from the Mariner clip, the scientists are doing this.
This evening is a very exciting night.
Turn back on and the program will go.
We've been waiting for it for over a year, so I think we're all pretty excited about what's happening.
What's next? Is Patty start next?
Patty start next, yes.
All right, it's time for you to push the button.
Okay. Hello. There we go.
You're coming in.
For 6 hours, the giant dish tracks the star across the sky, scanning billions of radio channels simultaneously. By 3:30 a.m., the observations are complete.
These 4 plots represent about 800 megahertz of the radio spectrum, and this is only about 1/4 of the amount of the radio spectrum that we're observing. If there was evidence of technology in these data, what we would expect to see is a spike in one of these plots, a lot of electromagnetic energy at just one channel. Now we don't see that yet, but in the coming days, weeks, and months, we're going to be looking at these data in many different ways with much higher resolution that will allow us to be much more sensitive to evidence of technology.
So just to summarize, they're basically looking for technological signatures, I think they're called, of aliens on surrounding exoplanets or stars which is extraordinary if you kind of think about the fact that less than 50 years before, they couldn't even tell if there was something growing on Mars. So I just think that shows how within certainly my lifetime, or the lifetime of lots of people in this room, just how far technology has come on, and how TV is reporting it as well, from the incredulous to the serious. The last clip I'm going to show you was from one of my SKX nights. I got a phone call over a weekend, which is very unusual, and Chris, who's the presenter, rang me, and he swore me to secrecy. It was like I was signing the official secrecy. That's what it felt like at the time, because he was telling me about a discovery that a friend of his had made, and the paper was unpublished at the time. It was about to be published, but did we want to do the exclusive on the SKX night? We could get in there, we could get filming. It was going to be breaking news everywhere. It was just super exciting. The clip says it all, if you want to play. Oh.
Last year, the SKX Night hotline rang, and the show was given a real exclusive.
We're having to be incredibly secret. So what is this top secret, groundbreaking discovery? Well, if you haven't heard, the team claimed that they found what could be the signs of life on Venus. I can't believe I get to say that to camera, but the team think they found what could be the signs of life on Venus. Abnormal levels of phosphine, a potential biosignature, had been detected in the planet's atmosphere. This was very unexpected.
We know there was probably a runaway greenhouse effect on Venus hundreds of millions or even billions of years ago, and as a result of that, the surface is now incredibly hot. But the clouds, and this was realised, I think, in the 1960s by Carl Sagan, when you go really high up, so about 50 kilometres up, the pressure in the clouds is like it is at the surface of the Earth, and the temperature is actually like 20 or 30 centigrade, so it's really quite habitable. The thinking behind this is perhaps Venus was habitable much like the Earth, but a long time ago, billions of years ago, as this runaway greenhouse effect happened, some of the smaller life was able to float up into the sky, essentially, and survive and develop new ways of living up there.
Astronomers have found weird things before and said maybe this might be a sign of life. In this case, obviously it's not definitive, but you said, okay, this is an experiment. If we find this, it might well be a biosignature. We'll look for it, and we found it.
We've done exactly what you're supposed to do in science. Predicted the thing, gone out and looked for the thing. The surprise was finding the thing.
It's the life on Venus, that's what I want to know.
So all I can say is maybe we've been looking in the wrong place all along, and we should have put all our effort into Venus instead of Mars. That's everything from me. Bill very kindly plugged the film tomorrow, The Rendezvous in the Future. I'll just add, it's based on the works of the science fiction author Saoirse Liu, who wrote Three Body Problems, so if anyone's a sci-fi fan, you should check it out, because it was the first ever interview he ever gave to, well, certainly to a Western crew, and I think it was the first ever one he accepted professionally. I'll tell you one I'll save that for tomorrow. I have a very funny story about that.
Okay, all right. Steve, we're tracking badly with time, so I'm not going to do any quick questions off the back of that. We can save those questions for the Q&A session after the music and after the break. Thank you very much indeed, Steve. Please, can you put our hands now time for our third presenter, Daniela DePaul. Now, Daniela, you have had so many associations with such important organisations involved in this field, including SETI and the Burbank Observatory. So I think what I'm going to do is, I don't think I can do this justice to introduce you. I'm going to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, introducing yourself before we get into your presentation. Thank you. That should be on. Should be on. No, is that? You pass it here, I can. Okay. Yeah, no, I'm the same. Hello, 1, 2. Daniela.
All right, thank you so much. My name is Daniela De Paulis. I am a media artist and I am affiliated with the SETI Institute. I recognize some of the people you show in the video. I work very closely with people who look for extraterrestrial intelligence, and I've been part of the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence committee for the past 11 years. And in a way, this is the background to this project, which I'm going to present today, which is called A Sign in Space. It's a big project that could be interpreted in many different ways. I give different talks about this project because there are different angles, different perspectives. And one of the perspectives I like to introduce is this project as a form of cosmic theater. However, today I'm going to delve into other aspects of the project. First of all, what is A Sign in Space? Having been part of the SETI research team for a very long time, I realized that one of their questions is where is everybody, of course, and also how do we detect extraterrestrial intelligence. And one of the scenarios that astronomers imagine is that we might receive a radio signal or an optical signal using, for example, radio observatories in the case of radio signals. So the search happens primarily at the moment using these radio telescopes that scan the sky looking for radio signals that are produced by an extraterrestrial intelligence, so clearly not of a natural origin. And this scenario has been playing out in my mind for a very long time, and at some point I decided to stage it in real time. So I imagined that through theater we could recreate a scenario which presented the arrival of a signal, of a radio signal from space, and the signal also is received by different radio telescopes on Earth. And in the case of this project I created, the data of the signal are shared in the public domain as opposed as remaining hidden just in the scientific labs. So this was a very ambitious project that took me more than 4 years to implement, and it became a large collaboration with some of the the facilities and the scientific institutions that are most involved in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, including the Green Bank Observatory in West Virginia, which was the radio telescope that we saw in the last clip, the Italian National Institute for Astrophysics, the SETI Institute, and the European Space Agency, as well as a panel of specialists from different fields, including anthropology, sociology, philosophy, and a lot of other fields. Sorry, what happened? I'm not sure. Did I press the wrong button? Oh, sorry, okay. So the title comes from a book which I highly recommend. It has been translated in many languages. This is the first version to be published. It's Le Cosmicomiche by Italian novelist Italo Calvino. And Calvino was inspired in his writing by science. So he used to really follow very closely scientific knowledge over the time. And the short novel called A Sign in Space, in my opinion, was really inspired by the newly founded science of SETI. So the science of SETI, modern science of SETI, so to speak, began in 1960s. In the 60s with Frank Drake, an American astronomer who with Project OSMA at the Green Bank Observatory first conducted a project to search for radio signals from a potential extraterrestrial intelligence. And Calvino translated this early form of SETI search into a novel which I found really captivating, in which the protagonist of the entire collection which is an imaginary being, which is neither an animal or a human. It is really a very mysterious entity. Is the very first entity to live in the universe, and as such, he, she, it, whatever, feels very lonely and decides to trace the very first sign of his presence, of their presence in space. After many millions of years and many rotations of the galaxy, they notice that there are more signs being drawn in the cosmos as a possible symbol that other people, other beings are maybe populating the cosmos at that point. So I thought it was a kind of humorous and also philosophical take on the science of SETI, which is, in my opinion, also quite humorous if we look at the absurdity of what we are looking for. It's really a question that is both philosophical, artistic, scientific. It is really a question that encompasses many fields, and it's ultimately a really deeply, deeply human question. So if we look at some of the most well-known, let's say, science fiction work that imagined this first contact scenario, we of course think of the movie Contact, which was made in 1997, and also maybe the movie Arrival, 2016. The science fiction book by Leo 16, which was translated in English, I believe, in 2014, and many other works, maybe Solaris and other works which are from different cultural background. In all these science fiction works, the typical scenario is that the radio signal is received by a team of scientists or specialists, and the data of the signal is kept secret within this scientific team. And in the case of Arrival, of course, it's an actual landing of extraterrestrials, but still this discovery is really kept very protected within the team. So the scenario I imagined is somehow very unlikely. The case where we receive the signal from space and we share the data in the public domain, asking citizen scientists to interpret this data and try to assign meaning to this message from an extraterrestrial civilization. In 2019, a linguist called Sherry Wells Jensen, who is also works closely with the NASA astrobiology team and who was also involved in the project, was asked, how could we decode a message from extraterrestrials? And she gave a really interesting answer. She says, give it to every adult and every child on the planet who wants it. Toss it to the dolphins and whales, show it to the other primates. And we need to encourage people to express that data in all kinds of ways, in strings of ones and zeros, in grids, using different pitches of sound with colored lights, played backwards, interpreted as instructions for origami, expressed in beadwork or knotted threads, or in mosaics made of M&Ms. And we should do this because we can have no idea how it was meant to be interpreted. And the very worst thing we can do is to leave it to professionals to pass over. It will be a glorious all hands on deck cacophony of thought and conjecture. And I'm reading this quote because it is exactly what happened with the message that we designed for A Sign in Space. It has been really interpreted in precisely all these kinds of ways, plus many other ways. So it was really a sort of a prediction. So this is, as I said at the beginning, it's a project that has several layers, and to me is also a project about semiotics and a way to really question the limit of human intelligence. And so there were some questions that I was really pursuing while developing this project. Some of them are listed here. So how does the process of meaning making unravel and evolve? So if we ever receive a message or just a signal from an extraterrestrial civilization, would we be able to find a definitive meaning for this message? How do humans create meaning when communicate with each other or with other species? This is also extremely challenging. We have extreme limitations already communicating among each other. And we find it extremely difficult to communicate with other species. I experienced that just yesterday when I got assaulted by a dog on my face. I interpreted the body language of the dog as a relaxed body language, but in truth, she was very uneasy with me touching her. So it's incredibly difficult to communicate with even terrestrial species. How can we assign meanings to something so detached from our terrestrial experience and possibly beyond our cognitive abilities? How can we communicate with a life that has evolved on another ancestral body with completely different environmental features? So do they have the same sensorial organs that we have, and so many other questions. So ultimately, this project is about the limits of knowledge in our communication and understanding. In order to make this possible, I brought together professionals that I met over the years. I've been involved with space scientists for the past 2 decades, so I built a very diverse and global network. And I kind of brought together all these people I knew, and so I created some 4 teams. The science team, including scientists from the European Space Agency, the Green Bank Observatory, the Allen Telescope Array, which is the telescope of the SETI Institute, and the Institute for Radio for Astrophysics in Italy. The outreach team with also communication specialists from these various institutions, plus the website team and the message team. The message team was really, I think, the most challenging, was assigned probably the most challenging task. So whereas the science team and the outreach team, they moved in their somehow field of knowledge and their safe zone, let's say, we in the message team, we really had an incredibly challenging task, which was to imagine ourselves becoming aliens. So try to imagine how would we communicate with another species. So this was both a great fun, but also extremely excruciating task to undertake. So the first stage, just to give you briefly an overview of how did we develop this project from 2019. The first step was actually testing this project with a satellite company which is called D-Orbit, and they agreed to make a test by transmitting the Arecibo message using this satellite which is orbiting Earth at 500 kilometer altitude. But okay, anyway, so they transmitted the Arecibo message back to Earth, and it was received at 2 radio telescopes, the Sardinia radio telescope in Italy and also the Medicina radio antenna in Italy. So they both received the Arecibo message, and this is the signal reception with the Doppler shift. The phase 2 was when ESA joined the project and agreed to use one of their spacecraft for transmitting the message towards Earth. At the same time, I was awarded a fellowship at the Green Bank Observatory, so they also became a partner of the project. And finally, the SETI Institute joined as well. So it took a few years just to create the actual scientific network. And also during this stage, we conducted several tests with the Trieste Gas Orbiter, which is the spacecraft we used for the project. which is orbiting Mars and like gathering data from the Martian surface. So we conducted a few tests between March and May 2023, and this is the signal reception at the various facilities, and some of the specialists in the team that were working in the project. This is the Allen Telescope Array, this is the Medicina radio antenna, so the reception was working perfectly. And fun fact, during these tests, the European Space Agency used this image for the tests. So they beamed themselves from Mars to Earth to see if the transmission and reception was working fine. Finally, on 24 May 2023, we were able to present this event as part of a SETI Live with the SETI Institute. And during the event, we had interviews with some of the members of the team. And in real time, the trace gas orbiter, as soon as it became visible, started transmitting the message that we created for the project for about 30 minutes. And in real time, the transmission happened in real time, and after I think 16 minutes, it was received by the collaborating telescope, so the Medicina. This is going on its own. I don't know, it's going really fast. I'm trying to stop it, but
sorry, what's happened?
It's just
Has it gone
moving
past
on
where
its
you
own.
need to go?
Yeah. Maybe I should go faster anyway, so maybe it's not a big problem.
Is that good?
Yeah, thank you. So maybe one slide back. Yeah. Okay. So thank you. So the collaborating telescopes received the signal successfully, and the Green Bank telescope we saw earlier, and some other telescopes that just joined in the reception because maybe they read the press release and they pointed their antennas towards the trace gas orbiter, and they reported back to us saying we also received the signal, however not as successfully as you did. So they received part of the signal anyway. So 6 telescopes we know received the signal, which is the ideal scenario for a successful SETI detection, because if you only receive the signal at one antenna, you cannot rule out possible sources for the signal. For example, it could be of natural origin or some interference from human artifacts or other causes. So in order to confirm without any doubt that the signal is from an extraterrestrial civilization, you need several telescopes to receive it at the same time, so it's quite challenging. So the project had quite successful media coverage, which was really crucial for engaging people from around the world, because that is exactly what we wanted. We wanted to engage people from different cultural backgrounds in the decoding of this message. So we had some of the major scientific outlets, scientific and non-scientific as well, covering this project, and I gave endless interviews for printed magazines. And just during the first week after the launch of the project, according to some statistical analysis that was conducted by the Green Bank Observatory, the project was mentioned reached more than 140 million people, and through 100 articles from around the world, and so we conducted some basic statistical analysis on its reach. We also created a dedicated channel on Discord for people to join in the decoding and interpretation of the message. I say decoding and interpretation because it's two different things really. So decoding requires more technical and scientific skills, whereas interpretation is more about trying to assign a meaning to the message. So it required really an interdisciplinary approach. And after 8 days since the launch of the project, the team of citizen scientists managed to extract the message data from the raw data that was received by the telescope, which is really challenging task, extracting the message data from the huge amount of data that was received. So this was really incredible, especially if we think that these people have a day job and were mostly actually working at night. So it was really they're hopping away. So the conversations became immediately really intense, and people were really trying to see what this message could mean, and there has been really thousands and thousands of interpretations. So I'm just showing some of them here. Someone printed a message on origami, and someone thought it could be a message in a braille form. And this was also printed and exhibited as well. So we don't know, of course, if, for example, alien intelligence have eyes. Someone made a bit created a working thread imagining the radio signals for transmitting the message. Someone took the message into three-dimensional form, creating puzzles. Someone, I think, imagined it could be a Morse code message, or maybe the Earth seen at night, so the map of the Earth. But essentially, so someone imagined it could be a call of help from another civilization, and so on and so forth. But essentially what we had was just a few dots, white dots on a black background. And eventually, just after 1 year since the launch of the project on 7 June 2024, a father and daughter team, Ken and Kelly Chaffin in the United States, found the so-called solution, which actually opened the new door. So they realized that this message was essentially the recipe for life on another planet by identifying 5 amino acids. So they first of all tried to understand what kind of amino acids this could be, and what kind of life form these amino acids could produce, for example, on Earth. And so this is a video. I'm not sure how it plays. So I just want to show you a little bit this message. So this message was, I think what I really find interesting about this message is that unlike other interstellar messages that we sent into space, this message is actually dynamic. So it is, can we play this, or which button do I have to play?
So
it's
this
short.
Is this a video?
It's just video, no audio. Yeah, thank you. So if you are familiar with cellular automaton, it's a computer. It's a process that essentially is made by cells that are dead and alive. So it's quite complex. But anyway, it's what I found interesting about this process called cellular automata is that it resembles a life seen through a petri dish. So I thought this message could represent really life in its formation stage. And I thought that maybe another civilization could transmit a recipe for life into space, and opening up this question of whether we should recreate it on life or not. So if we ever received life from another planet, we would probably be torn by this question, whether it's a good idea to create it or not. So partly the ideas for this message was led by another science fiction book called His Master's Voice by Stanislav Lem. I won't go into the story, but it's a very interesting book. So in total, between the launch of the project in May 2023 and June 2024, just on Discord, more than 50,000 messages were exchanged in the attempt to give meaning to this message, with more than 1 million words being produced, and several thousand images also were produced trying to give meaning. And this was just from 285 people that were active in the decoding process. So this was just to give you an idea of how much effort it requires to give meaning to something that is unknown to, for example, the human species. And this effort, by the way, is still ongoing. So if we were to print all the material that is on Discord, it would probably be bigger than, like, I think one of the biggest literature work in Western civilization, which is In Search of Lost Time. Also, there were other ways to engage the public that did not require particular technical skills. On the website, we had this drawing pad, which was extremely user-friendly, and we received about 1,000 drawings, and we tried to organize these drawings in different categories. Some resembles signs and signatures, some seem to be like written messages, formulas and graphs, or maps and images with reference to pop culture. A lot of those actually more images with reference to pop culture. So this really shows that pop culture is really shaping the in people's imagination the scenario, the first contact scenario. So if we ever receive a signal from another civilization, we will probably be heavily influenced by whichever movies we watched or whichever books we read. So they really shaped our imagination. Going back to what Michael was saying earlier, that science fiction has really been the driving force for a lot of the creativity and imaginaries around the contact with aliens. So some messages were more complex, like suggesting entire stories. Finally, I just want to mention all the partners and sponsors of the project, especially Modern Funds and Creative Funds. Ultimately, this was primarily an art project, so I'm really pleased that our funding recognized it as such. Also, there is an endless list of collaborators. I would say more than 90 people worked in the project. And so I really would like to thank also the people from the public who engaged with it. And more information here, and feel free to contact me. Thank you so much. I hope I didn't go too much.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. We don't have any time for immediate questions off the back of this because we're running a bit behind, but I really want to explore, when we get some Q&A at the end, about artistic interpretation of the people who interpreted the messages and what was their influence. I mean, we are going to spill out our own beliefs in the messages we do. I can see we're going to talk about that after the break. Okay, thank you very much indeed, Daniel. So I would like to ask our last presenter to now take the stand. Forgive me while we do a little bit of changeover.
Hi folks, some of you have seen me already today. Put your hands up if you have. Oh, you're going to be in for a treat. You're going to see it again. No, it's an expanded version, don't worry.
Okay.
Hands up, who knows the band The Foo Fighters? Quite a few of you. Do you know where the name comes from? Okay, well, I'm going to explain it to the rest of you anyway. So, most people think, if you look at books and magazines and films, etc., things like that the modern day UFO phenomenon started in June 1947. Well, here's some more information to tell you that it actually started a little bit before that, at least, in terms of documentation. At the end of 1944, the US Army US Army Air Force night fighter units in Europe were seeing rather strange things in the skies over eastern Belgium, eastern France, and western Germany. But this is Kenneth Arnold, so June 1947, So he's already seen things that make the headlines around the world, and of course that's when people think that they see, UFO phenomenon starts. But like I said, in November 1944, this all kicks off in a big way, and they're called the Foo Fighters. Now the name actually comes, I'll explain that in a minute, but they're basically balls of light which are following night fighters on missions over the areas I mentioned before. Bristol Beaufighters and P-61 Black Widows from 2 units, the 415th Night Fighter Squadron and the 422nd. And their crews are getting scared. And this information isn't just anecdotal, it actually comes in the form of intelligence reports, picked up at the time, passed on to higher authority, and they talk about all these things. So you can see some of the reports there. They talk about followings, they talk about other things as well. It actually got to a wider audience just after the war, and at the end of 1945 there was a magazine that was circulated around the troops, and it was one of the articles was called The Foo Fighter Mystery, and you can see the headline there, and it was produced by an aide to an Air Force general who had been he was embarked with the troops, and he talked to pilots and they told him about what was going on. So here's some of the information that comes out of the intelligence reports. We have the classic description. We have encountered a phenomenon which we cannot explain. Crews have been followed by lights that blink on and off. Actually, they were just solid, didn't go on and off. Changing colours, etc. They were very close. And they followed the aircraft through evasive manoeuvres, you name it, trying to shake these things off. They just flew off on their own volition. And it really did rattle the crews. So the information regarding these was collated, it was sent up the chain of command. The people who were looking at the intelligence personnel didn't have a clue, didn't know what these things were. They thought they were German secret weapons, but they didn't have any evidence to prove that. And at the end of the day, the Americans passed the information to the British Air Ministry, said, you try and sort this out, you tell us what this is. And the thing on the left there is basically the response in March 1945. They said that it was either the German jet fighter, the Messerschmitt 262, or flak rockets, which are basically surface-to-air missiles. Now, the Germans were experimenting with jet fighters, but very, very few at night. They hadn't really perfected the technology. And in terms of flak rockets, none of them went in production. But that wasn't the start of the story. The story started a lot earlier. And this, again, is borne out by intelligence documents, interviews with crews, pilots, that kind of thing. So one of the first notable sightings happened over Holland in March 1942, and it was aftermath of a raid on Essen in the Ruhr, and this is a Polish crewed Wellington bomber 301 squadron based in Lincoln, near Lincoln, and they're flying back from the raid, and the tail gunner shouts over the intercom to the pilot, we've got something coming up behind us, a big orange disc. It came up behind the aircraft. The pilot naturally said, open fire on it, because they thought it was a German night fighter, and the bullets went into the object. It didn't come out the other side. The thing didn't burst into flames, fall away, wasn't destroyed. It just sat there and absorbed the bullets. Each 10th round is a tracer bullet, so it's luminous, so you can see where the bullets go at night. After it absorbed how many countless bullets, it flew round to the wingtip of the aeroplane and then sat there as the aircraft's flying through the sky about 200 miles an hour. It then moved around to the nose of the aeroplane and sat off the nose as the aircraft's flying through the skies. And then, according to the pilot, it then shot off into space in 45 degrees and disappeared. And it would have been just an interesting footnote, but for when they got back to base, debriefed by the intelligence officers, one of the crews flying in the bomber stream behind them said, we saw that too. Daylight missions were also seeing strange things. In 1955, somebody got in touch with a UFO researcher in America, and he was a ball turret gunner on a B-24 Liberator, flying anti-submarine missions over the Bay of Biscay. And these were one of the first American bomber crews to ever come into Britain, and that's what they were doing. They weren't bombing Germany at this time, they were doing missions like this. And his story was that, again, something strange came up behind the aeroplane. but he described it as a huge wingless object. And in this case, 6 pictures were taken by a crew member on the aircraft. Now those pictures have never surfaced, but this thing came up behind them, they didn't open fire on it, it did a 180-degree turn and flew away. Now, we do have some documentation to go with this particular incident. This is what I mentioned earlier today. This is a crew from 61 Squadron flying Lancasters, again from a Lincolnshire base, flying to attack the Fiat engine factory in Turin. And they're flying around Switzerland. So they're going over the French and the Italian Alps, and over the latter, they come in contact with this huge 200 to 300 foot object. Now that's not just me making that up. It appears in a document sent from the station to number 5 group, which was basically, they looked after all of the various airfields and units in that Lincoln area. And it mentions about this huge object. The width was 1/5 or 1/6 of the length of the object. It had lights down the side of it. It was huge. Now, you might think, well, that's just a Zeppelin. But the Germans got rid of their last Zeppelin in 1940. They were basically broken up to use the metal to build aeroplanes. And he also said that he'd seen something similar over Amsterdam 3 months earlier. And of course, at this time, there was stigma amongst the crews because more and more of them were seeing things like this or lights in the sky that they couldn't identify. They couldn't identify them as German weapons or what have you. So stigma started really early. One of the first UFO researchers, believe it or not, was Spanish, a guy called Oscar Bray. And his interest in the phenomenon started in a battle on the Eastern Front in February 1943. It was the Battle of Krasny Bor. That's near what was Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. And you may not be aware that the Spanish actually sent a whole division of volunteers to fight on the German side during World War II, the so-called Blue Division, and they were involved in this battle. It was a 3-day battle, and one of the stories that come from that, and he was witness to this, was of a bathtub-shaped object watching the battle going on underneath. So you had the ground forces in combat, aircraft above flying around, trying to shoot each other down, and this thing watching them from above. So moving on, and again with the stigma, so the crews are seeing things that they don't understand, they're being ridiculed by the squadron mates, and this continued in North Africa on fighter crews doing night intruder missions behind German lines. And this is over Tunisia, and 43 Squadron, a Hurricane pilot, who's a New Zealander called Ted Bennett, and he's flying a Hurricane on a night intruder mission, and an orange light suddenly appears on his wingtip. 10 years later, well, 12 years later, there was a famous story in New Zealand of an airline crew who saw a UFO, and it made the national news across there. So he, remembering his wartime encounter, he decided to write a letter to the New Zealand Minister of Civil Aviation. And there's part of the letter, and that's him, he's called Ted Bennett. And he talks about this light on his wingtip, and you can't shake it. He'll fly around. He did find out that if he actually did a quick enough maneuver, it took time to kind of catch up with him. So you could get behind it. Now this aircraft is armed with 4 20mm cannon. It can shoot, it can blow up soft-skin vehicles, light armor. And of course he tried to open fire at this thing, but nothing happened. And flying back to his own lines, it faded away and then disappeared. And then when he turned around to try and complete his mission, it was back again. And he didn't know what he was flying, he was trying to chase either, but they basically got into a spiral dogfight with this thing outperforming his quite powerful aeroplane. Okay, so this one's a bit closer to home. So Anik, Northumberland, we have a Coastal Command training aeroplane, a Mosquito, and this one, the pilot says that he encountered at 22,000 feet over Anik 4 rectangular-shaped objects. And there's the entry in the unit records that he mentions there. He even gives the serial number of the aeroplane, the time, and all of the relevant information. We don't know whether that information was followed through by the intelligence personnel. We can't find, or I can't find any follow-up reference to it yet. And then towards the end of the war, after the Foo Fighter kind of menace, if you like, was sort of subsiding, there were still daylight sightings at this time. This is a photo reconnaissance Spitfire pilot with 541 Squadron. He's called Jimmy Robson. He actually lived in Sunderland until his death. And he's flying over Germany on a mission, and he overtakes a pink sphere, which is flying it's just slightly slower than his PR Spitfire. So it's flying at about 400 miles an hour. He spoke to a researcher in the late 1980s when he was still alive, and that was the form he filled in to tell the guy what he'd actually seen. And you think this was only about 3 foot in diameter, and it was flying, next to his wingtip when he passed it. So there's these strange objects that were seen in World War II, and nobody seems to know what they are. So one of the kind of ideas that a lot of people have had over the years is that the Germans were building things that nobody seems to know about, that would have won the war, but for whatever reason. So let's investigate some of those quickly. So, one of the things that they thought the Foo Fighters was the Comet rocket interceptor, and it was a very, very dangerous airplane for the Luftwaffe pilots. It actually killed more pilots of theirs than it did with the aircraft it tried to shoot down. The rocket engine was volatile. The fuel could dissolve a pilot alive if it came into contact with skin, so it was very, very dangerous. RAF intelligence people thought it was the glider bomb, the Henschel 293. That was wire guided, so that was never going to be able to chase after airplanes. The Germans did have surface-to-air missiles in development, like the Schmetterling, the Butterfly, but that didn't come into service before the end of the war. And the Germans were experimenting with the first air-to-air missiles, such as the Ruhrstahl X4. Again, those weren't put into production because we bombed the factory that was making the rocket engines for them. So they never went into service either. So none of these things, and there's lots of other projects that the Germans were working on, but none of them fit the profile for the things that were seen. If you want to know more about this, and this is obviously just a really quick explanation of some of the things that happened during World War II, have a look at these books on Amazon. I've written 2 now on various World War II incidents. The first book is over 500 pages, and the second one's half that, but it goes into much, much more detail. And I've got a couple of copies with me as well, so if anybody wants to take away ones tonight, I'm happy to sign them and give them to them. And that's it, thanks very much. I've got actually one more thing to do.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Again, we don't have enough time for Q&A straight after the talk, because we're tracking a little bit behind time, but I'm very, very grateful because you caught up a lot of time for us there. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, we will be going into some music now. You heard their song opening us tonight. This is the Cosmic Frequencies house band, SKX Funkanauts. They have Voyages from Dynatron. Their EP is out now. You can buy this from the reception area. But playing us 2 tracks before we go to the break. After the break, we will be back for our Q&A session. So please come back for that, where you will have your opportunity to ask all the questions that we didn't get a chance to ask while we were doing the session today, mainly because we were running. But please have your questions ready. We will now ask for the main lights to go down, as we would ask you to please put your hands together to welcome to the stage SKX Funkanauts.
Whoa.
Yes, we're just waiting for our last presenter. I look to the left, and there, like a ghost. Thank you, everybody, for investing in Cosmic Frequencies. We hope to make this an annual event. This is the second year it's run. It came from an idea from Michael from the Funkanauts, and I was at home in Australia when he said, "Oh, how do you fancy doing this?" as an idea, and myself and one of the other producers, unfortunately no longer involved, Nicole Skelties, went, all right, we'll dive into this, and we put this together. Last year, I think, was a bit of a surprise as to how well it was received. We had a fantastic panel last year, as we have had again this year. 2 are returners and 2 are new. And we hope to encourage other people. Now, hopefully some of you came to Cosmic Conversations, which was the session, a new session that we did during the day. A bit lower turnout, obviously, because it's just sort of one-off sessions, and we're trying to get the momentum going. There is also an art installation at the Room 4, which I think you were told about. There was something happening at the community centre today, but that will not be happening tomorrow. That was just a one-off. But what we do have, and I think I mentioned it earlier, enough plugging, Steve gave it a bit of plugging, which is that we do have a showing of 2 films tomorrow. These are both exclusive, starting at 11 o'clock here. So please do give that some thought about coming on to that film, which I've seen, Rendezvous with the Future, which was produced by Steve sitting to my left, former BBC colleague of mine, is an absolutely fantastically glossy, landmark production, just as you have always done, Steve, as is your signature filmmaking style, and is a really, really interesting watch, especially because it is a lot of the narrative of Saoirse Liu, who wrote the three-part opera. So a lot of his thinking behind what was going into the books, I think would be fair to say went into that documentary. And Steve will be doing a brief Q&A after that, so please think about coming to that. And then we have the UFOs of Sosterberg. So if you were here earlier, you've seen Brown Rosa sitting there and waving his hand, who produced a fantastic film around a particular incident period in Netherlands history. It is English, it's subtitled in English, isn't it? But it is Dutch language, but I think very readable and watchable, mainly because these things are very visual. So this is our Q&A session. So this is your bit. This is the bit where you get to ask the panel questions. You get to tell us your stories. This is the bit where we turn over cosmic frequencies to you. Our panel are ready and waiting for your questions. I might just seed it with one question first. A very simple question. Steve, I'll pass to you. And then if you go along with mine, I'm going to ask you a simple question. Are we alone in the universe, cynic or believer? Steve?
I categorically believe we are not alone in the universe, but I also categorically believe we've never been visited by aliens.
Oh. Controversial.
I believe we're not alone in the universe. How that transpires, open-minded, and very open-minded about having been visited before. I'd like to think that Egypt was built by aliens, but that's just in my fantasy.
I hate the A word. Every time I've been interviewed on podcasts, and there's quite a few hundred now, I try and steer away from it because I don't think that's kind of fair. Somebody once said that opinions are like backsides, everybody's got one. So really, I try and not get involved in that kind of thing. But if I'm pushed, yeah, maybe. But then again, there's other strands as well. People have said that maybe they're just us from the future and they've invented time travel. So, or they're what we call ultra-terrestrials, which they're here already, and we just can't see them for some strange reason. Or maybe some of us can. And there's two strands there, or they're from somewhere else. Any of those things could be right or not. It could be something that we haven't worked out yet. So, I'm on the fence. I've got a sore backside from sitting on the fence. And if you've read any of my books, you'll know that I don't tell you what to think. I just write things down and say, look, you make your own mind up. So this is me sitting on the fence again. Sorry, Bill.
That's right. Danielle.
I'm also a believer. What can I say? But I think in I don't know what form we will find out at some point whether we're alone or not. I don't know how. If maybe it will be microbial life on Europa, or really we might receive some kind of radio signal or optical signal from somewhere. So I think I'm optimistic. I don't know when. I think maybe in the far future, but yeah.
Okay, and from my own view, I am genuinely cynic. I was for a long while a investigative journalist, such as the time when I worked with Steve, but I do hypothesize about things, and you mentioned it, Graham, which is that this idea that AI has somehow worked out how to time travel, and if AI exists in the future, that actually what's coming back and visiting us is not even humans, it's we've been replaced, and it's computers and AI that are coming back and teasing us in all their randomness. So I'm not saying that's the case. All right, this is going to be a little bit like question time, except for Nigel Farage isn't here. There we go. All I can say is go count Pinface. He's from another planet. So, anybody got any kind of point, question they would like to start to raise? We would swap the microphones around. If not, oh, hang on, we have our first We have our first contestant.
Yes, we're going to have to wait until my little legs get back.
Rob's, we're keeping Rob fit.
Fit?
Yeah.
Hello. There was a lot of talk about life on the thing tonight. I haven't unfortunately been to the other events you've been holding today, so I apologise if this might seem a repeated question. But my experience of life is that it's very connected to consciousness. And consciousness is probably, for me, the most sort of important question about when you're going to define whether someone is an extraterrestrial or a human or whatever, because it's the connection that you have with another person through your heart, your feeling, your consciousness. And I personally, I've been psychic since I was a child. I see and hear and see a lot of things. And I've done a lot of meditation. For many, many thousands of years, people who have had a meditative life have always said and reported that they have had contact with consciousnesses from other places. And that's certainly my experience. And knowledge also, when you look at past lives, that maybe I've not been a human, I'm a human now, but I've been another life, in a past life, I've been a different sort of being. But my consciousness has remained a thing that's travelled through those various experiences. And there is an enormous amount of literature, obviously, in the spiritual world about all this. And I personally know many, many people who would say to the answer to your question that yes, definitely there is other life on this universe because, I've psychically travelled and seen it. Yes, there is we are already in contact with it as far as I'm concerned. And I'd like to know your panel's comments or ideas around just that notion of consciousness being the vehicle rather than the physical form of the biological cell.
Okay, can I pass that down first to Daniela? Because art and consciousness for me is a very, very important connection.
I'm not sure about that, but I don't have really. So usually when you are, when one of the things that happens within the scientific community is these kind of questions are brushed out. They're completely ignored. And also the UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, are not included in the setting conversation. So there is this black hole. Personally, I think that indeed my project, the project I presented is about the limits of our cognition. So in also several philosophers question the validity of the scientific method because it is based on a materialistic approach. So, for example, in neuroscience, scientists try to measure consciousness using, for example, electroencephalogram techniques, which is measuring in a materialistic way something that we don't know exactly what it is. So that is because I think it's really difficult to understand ourselves outside of our world, of our cognitive abilities, of our own mind. So indeed, we have these limitations. I'm aware of these accounts of people who had contact with what they believe it is an extraterrestrial civilization, maybe through meditation or some type of drugs. I personally have really no opinion on that because it's just, I have no reason not to believe these people or to believe this. I really have a completely neutral approach to this. And if you say that you have this kind of contacts, I have no reason to doubt your, your experience. So I'm listening to what you're saying. That unfortunately, I have no experience of this kind. So I find it hard to relate to it, personally speaking.
Okay, I'm going to just jump in here because I'm actually a clinical cognitive neuroscientist by training, I guess, a sort of psychologist. And I look at consciousness as the result of a very complex set of mechanisms which I would study as electrical, chemical mechanisms that happen in the brain and our neurological system. But I do see an art in it. And I say, when I say an art in it, I mean that I see something that is kind of almost a little bit beyond kind of natural evolution. I kind of sort of look at it and I start thinking, hang on a second, there's something quite scary here that I can't quite explain. Now, I'm as cynical as the next person, but I do look at it and I think there are. It would be very easy for me to dismiss a lot of the discussion around consciousness. I mean, there are people discussing, well, is the universe conscious? Is it a being that is that has some kind of level of consciousness? Well, it's a massive organism. You might argue there are bacteria and lots of other life forms that keep me alive, that make me do something. But at the top of it, there's a bloke here with a microphone in his face, kind of explaining something, drinking a beer, thinking he's kind of got something to say. That is consciousness, I assume. But the point is, pardon?
With the mass of a sugar cube.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I mean it's some. But the point is, there is a sort of element for me when having studied this, where I look at it and I say that there's something that I don't quite understand. I had this conversation. I'll finish up very quickly with Professor Sir Carlos Frank this morning. And he's an astrophysicist. He loves the idea of quantum mechanics and all the very complex bits in the universe. And I'm a person who deals with all of the ideas and the way the human brain kind of comes up with ideas. And everything else, every single other concept, everything you do, everything is the line in between those two positions. And it's merely detail. I mean, it's just detail. And the fact is those two things could sit around the back. The fact is that my consciousness could be being affected by quantum mechanics that I have no awareness of. So to my extent, it's scary, actually, what we don't know and how much I might be driven by forces outside of this. So I'm quite open to that idea. So apologies. So I'd like to ask, who would like to next pick up this question? Graham.
So I have no frame of reference from which to answer your question, because I'm not the same as you. I don't seem to have that ability. What I would say is that, here's another quote for everybody, it could be strange, not just stranger than we imagine, stranger than we can imagine. That becomes what life or consciousness or however you want to label it, that's what it could be. It could be beyond our ken, that we are simply unable to actually put a label on it, to understand it. We may never be able to see it, or quite a lot of the population may never be able to see it. And a lot of people kind of think of this not invented here syndrome, that if we can't make it, we can't understand it, then it doesn't exist. So that's a factor as well that we have to get past. And until people do that, then we're not going to be able to embrace anything that becomes things that we don't understand. And that's what it will be in the end of the day. It'll be something we haven't considered and we just haven't got to grasp it yet.
I think for me with consciousness, and I'm in danger of treading into territory which I don't fully understand in many different ways here, but one of the things that I love about the thought of consciousness is the comfort that can come with it, in that when you have somebody who passes, who dies, you kind of think of them as, that's it, it's finite, it's done. But there is an argument to suggest, and there is a lot of debate around what is consciousness. Is it a physical thing? Is it driven by a series of chemicals or electrical signals? Whatever it might be. Mass and energy can't be destroyed in the universe. So after that person's died, that energy that created that consciousness has gone somewhere. It has to. That's the law of the universe. Where it goes, we don't know. And then there's some really interesting thought around the connection between different particles and how particles at great distances can communicate with each other. even though they're completely separate and may never have met. So I think there's a lot that we don't understand. I think there's some things that we do understand that might lead us in an interesting path in the future. Or maybe it's just something that we're just not meant to know. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, is that we're just human and we don't have to know everything. It's okay that the universe is not understandable in some ways.
Blimey. I'm not a scientist. I used to paint submarines over in Barrow and Furness for 10 years before I escaped. I went to art college in Carlisle, then I went down to London and got a job in telly. So all my references can only really come from TV, I think. And I think I will answer this question by saying I made a programme once called Which Universe Are We In? And it was about the theory of the multiverse. And it had 4 scientists, and each one had a different theory about how infinity works. And a bit like Dan's just said, you know, is there one big bang that everything is created, everything, and then it all gets uncreated at the end of it, the big crunch, and it all just comes back again. And that just goes around in a big circle for infinity, and you and me will both be born and live our lives again, and everything will be exactly the same in one of those universes, except I'll be wearing black trousers and not red trousers. And that's it. And then we interviewed another physicist who said, no, my theory is that there are an infinite amount of universes, and they all exist at exactly the same time. And she studied I think it's called the Corby background information. Is that right? The big cosmic background information map. And we shot a whole sequence with her, a physicist, you know, from Harvard or wherever. And she's like, you see that little pattern there, and that bit of this background information map, that's where another universe is banged into our universe. And here's all the numbers, and I can prove that. So, you know, who knows, I guess, is my answer to that. I literally don't know.
Something you said, Dan, last year was when you showed the background cosmic radiation picture, was you said it looks very much like the nervous system of a brain. And so the question there is, are we seeing things within ourselves? These are like repetitive mechanisms. Very good question. Thank you very much indeed. Do we have another question, please, or another point? Okay.
Hi, so mine's more, I guess, looking at ancient texts. So if we hark back to like the Book of Enoch and throughout religions, they talk about, or Enoch talks about, watchers that came down to pass on information and technology that we weren't supposed to know at the time. Now these are real texts that have been interpreted in that way. Same with the Egyptian texts. Whatever we kind of worked out in the Egyptian text that it says, we've come to that conclusion, but with Enoch it's a similar circumstance. My question is, they talk about the second coming, and I'm not going to get religious in any way, but are we experiencing that again? Was at that point, did they have such a catastrophic, I don't know, event to make these things, whatever they were, intervene in our society, and we're seeing that again?
Do you mean almost a knowledge revelation, a second coming of knowledge?
Potentially, yes. The way it's explained in the Book of Enoch, it looked like if we looked at it with modern eyes, you could almost go, okay, that makes sense. If we interpret it in a different way, it makes a lot of sense if you apply it to today's theories.
Steve, you are involved in the dissemination of information and understanding around science. How do you feel about that point?
I'm not quite sure I follow your point, actually. Are you saying that 2,000 years ago, stories were written about beings coming down from the sky? Yeah. And now we're doing it again now.
We're like, almost, there's something going on that we are doing to ourselves, or something that's making these things intervene. Back then, was there a catastrophic event that was created for them to come down and intervene? Is that happening again?
I don't think so. I mean, I think I do know enough about. I've made a few history programs, so not just science programs, and I know that it's pretty much agreed around the world that there was a big flood, like 7,000 years ago or something, and Again, we made a horizon about it, and where it possibly came from and what caused it. And then you've got that folk memory of that flood being told with lots and lots of different civilizations having their own interpretations of it. But other than that, no, I don't think so. Because, I can never remember this quote, right? and I wish I could. So if someone in the crowd can absolutely remember it, and I might even be saying this, giving it to the wrong person. I think it's William Gibson, the writer, the cyberpunk writer, and I think he said something like, the invention of the mobile phone has made UFOs obsolete, but invented police brutality. Right? And I just think, the reason I love that quote, it's something like that, but is that it's just technology that we've got now. And I think, I'll finish by saying this other really interesting thing. I made a Horizon, which was called Horizon Guide, and it was looking at how computers and AI had been reported over the 60s. So you know the clips I was showing about how we told the story of aliens for 40 or 50 years. We did the same with computers and technology. And what I noticed is really weird. For each decade that went, there was a point where everybody thought it was brilliant. So the 60s, computers, robots, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. And then the 70s, everyone was terrified of it again. And then in the 80s, when home computers started, everyone thought it was brilliant again. And in the 90s, everyone was happy. It was this really strange pattern of how technology kind of affects us. But I don't think I've adequately answered your question. I'll have a go.
I think the thing that comes to mind for me is there's a lot of evidence to suggest that we were more technical at one point and then it stopped and got lost. And the kind of evidence I draw on there is the Antikythera mechanism that was found in Greece, an incredibly sophisticated piece of technology that would allow us to be able to, almost like clockwork, figure out where things were in the night sky in the future. And the Babylonians are said to have been the people who developed this instrument. There's only really been one that I know of found piece of technology like it, but the level of technology that it was at, wasn't seen again for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And this was around about the 200, 300 BC. I might have my time is slightly wrong there, but so there's an argument to say that, and I've heard some really outlandish claims about this, that had we left the Babylonians alone, they may have actually been able to reach the moon within 500 years. I think that's a really interesting thought. Were we moving too quickly, and then someone did come in and go, whoa, hang on, calm down. And is that we are at that point again.
We've landed. When I look up at the sky at night, I see 100 billion stars of the Milky Way galaxy. They look like lights in cabins of a giant spaceship, the Milky Way, sailing through space. And I wonder if there are other passengers in those cabins. It would be arrogant to think that we are alone, that we are unique and special.
sail to see what difference we could make to atone for our own sins, our own mistakes. And we chased those signals up the arm of Orion, catching each message, each dot, each dash. And as we sped up, they came faster and faster. Dot, dash, followed by voice, by music, by song, by praise, by joy. A harpsichord and a skylark in unity. We heard for the first time John Lennon. Can you imagine? John Fogerty. And the grandfather of Sol James Brown. And as we came along, message after message came through. Ich bin ein Berliner. We will fight them on the beaches. Gorbachev, tear down these walls. A humanity torn by war, united by soul. Dot, dot.